Talk Shoes. Recorded live.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fight for Our Freedom Radio. And I'm your host, Bad Baby. And tonight we are so honored to have back with us my good friend, renowned astronomer, Gill Broussard. And we are going to update you with good information on how to prepare. Welcome to the show, Gill. How are you this evening?
Doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you back. We love hearing from you.
Well, I'm glad to take the opportunity to answer any of your followers' questions and maybe enlighten them on any new information we may have.
Well, we are going to, this evening, towards the end of the show, for those that are going to call in that are on the phone, if they want to push star 8 and raise their hand, we will allow you to be unmuted and ask Gill questions tonight. Before we get to that part of it, I want to ask you, Gill, explain to us why our government is not telling us about this planet and what's going on.
Well, it's not beneficial for people to lose their jobs. We call it a panic in the marketplace. They'd lose their retirement. Banks would seize up. Economy would come to a screeching halt, and people would be worse off than if they allowed the economy to continue. But the only thing it does, it leaves the public in the dark on preparing and studying about what could occur and what are the facts and is this object real?
Do you think, Gill, that they do not want people to be prepared or survive this event?
Different leaders have different misopinions on that subject, but they've showed them models. They've had a computer model that shows them, particularly for their country, how quickly it would go into chaos if it would be announced. The market collapse, or currency falling or fluctuating drastically, and then the people would be less prepared than what they would be before. So it's really left up to an individual to do his own studies and come to some sensible conclusion. Is this a real object or is it not? And what would be a proper way of preparing for it? And so it's left up to the individual.
So why do they suppress us that are trying to get this information out so badly? Because I know a lot of people that have researched this planet and that are under great attack for even coming out here and talking about it.
I think there's various reasons for different people. Some people, I'm not quite sure whether they have correct data, and there's many people on the internet that the data, they claim to have data, but they don't. They have stories, ancient stories that which for the most case is not interpreted correctly. Because if you don't have a basis, a root to understand the story, like through the Chinese record, Asian records we have, now we can go back and look at these ancient writings in a much different light and understand much clearer what they're talking about.
Well, Gill, how did you decide to start researching this?
Well, I started off with a question. People ask me different things, and I've had a question or two pertaining to this planet, whether or not it's real and if it has any validity. And I gave a off-the-cuff answer saying that as far as I would be concerned, it's not real because of some of the information that I heard on the internet. It didn't make astronomical sense, didn't make mathematical sense, and often it didn't even join correctly with science. So it leads the person to believe that something like this does not exist. And that's where I was. I was a hardened skeptic. And so, but there was a series of catastrophes that happened in the past. That's quite clear to find in the text of different cultures and different periods of time. Now, was there a common denominator that was the cause of this? It definitely wasn't global warming, as what we call it today. And so I decided to check the Asian records because their records go back the farthest as far as astronomy goes. And it goes back probably close to 4,000 years, 4 to 5,000 years. And I picked up a white paper report. It was the reevaluation of the East and Western records of the supernova of 1054. The supernova was seen earlier than what was, about 3 or 4 months earlier than what was normally dated. And that the main data that people were using, it ended up not being a supernova because this object moved through multiple constellations. A supernova is stationary, just like the North Star or any other, object that's stationary. It just doesn't move through multiple constellations. And it kind of piqued my interest because that's what we're looking for. Would be an object of sizable, an object that's sizable, that has a long period of approach, that probably has not been defined properly yet. And this paper piqued my interest, so they gave very exacting information for the time period. Elevations, time of day, where they were seeing it at, and it was not just the Chinese, but the Korean and the Japanese. So you have 3 different cultures, similar with their research. They're very exact with their plotting and information. And that's when I decided that I had enough information to make an attempt to plot this. And doing some hand calculations told me that this object was on the ecliptic. And when something is on the ecliptic, that's the only way that Earth can have a meteor shower, basically. And that was another qualifier for this object, that it had to create meteor showers. But when I got through with my calculations, and running models in the astronomy software, it proved that it crossed Earth's path twice. That is a rarity. And the other rarity was that it crossed it at roughly 150 to 152 days apart. Well, that brought up memories on what the biblical records were stating. In Noah's flood, it mentions 150 days, and in the book of Revelation, it mentions 5 months. Well, they're both the same amount of time period. And so I had to figure out how often did it come through history, what was its frequency, and what sort of catastrophes associated with it. And I found 14 cases in the biblical records and quite a few secular records. Matter of fact, today I found another one that I'm still doing some research on in the secular that lines up also with a biblical event. And again, it's shown as a winged disc. The most common drawing throughout different cultures was a disc with wings. It showed that they had a disc that would fly across the sky, basically movement, Mm-hmm. And that would be the perspective from someone from Earth. Now, it doesn't always pass close to Earth to where it's viewed as as a major disc. The last time it came very close to Earth was Hezekiah. And that's when our calendar year changed from 360 to 365 and a quarter days. And it came semi-close after that during Yeshua's sacrifice, where it caused 3 days of darkness. 3 hours of darkness. But we haven't had a close call as in those days. But the book of Revelation gives us some very serious data and comments or statements. It says the next time it passes that this will be the worst time in all of Earth's history. Well, the data proves out that Noah's flood actually literally happened. And that was not the worst. This next event is going to be the worst. So it definitely grabs my attention and gives me cause for concern.
Yeah, absolutely. So when this event does unfold, just exactly what will we be experiencing here on this planet?
Well, I just put out a small sheet of about 16 points. It actually should be almost maybe double that, but I didn't want to bore the people with too many details. But as it approaches, you have severe earthquake and volcanic activity. As we've seen an escalation, but it's going to be much greater even.
Right. Now, are we seeing an escalation right now because it's approaching and the closer it gets, the more it's affecting our planet?
We have dips and highs for the volcanic and the earthquake, but we've never seen it as many as we're seeing now. Let me give you, for instance, let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here.
I know I read an article where there was a couple of volcanoes that just they came alive in the last few months that have been dormant for over 300 years.
Yeah, this is common. Also, many people are not aware that under our oceans, just within the last few years, someone decided to do a survey of how many volcanoes are under our oceans. Well, we only have roughly about, I don't know the exact number, but I'll give you a ballpark. Like on land, it's between 1,200 to 1,800 volcanoes, on our continents. But below the oceans, we're looking at over 3 million.
Wow.
Okay? And I personally believe that is the source of the El Nino effects and La Nino.
That's what's heating the ocean up, isn't it?
Yes, because the most active part of this is around the just south of Japan, where there's a lot more of these subsea volcanoes are going off, and the way the water currents go, it pushes that hot water towards South America whenever they're extremely active. I believe that has something to do with it, that they have not been mentioning that to the public. Because I have friends in different parts of the world that have stated they've had an earthquake, a 3 or 4 that's mentioned locally, but it's not mentioned on our national survey. The place where they're supposed to have all of the earthquake records, at the USGS records. So they're not showing us all of the earthquakes. For instance, in 1973, we'd have roughly over 4,500 earthquakes annually. Well, just in 2014, we had over 118,000 earthquakes. And if you go back a little bit further in the 1950s and put up an average of what it was per year, we have that happening in one day now on occasion. What we used to see as far as earthquakes happening throughout the whole the whole year in the last century, we're having it happen in one day now. And this is across the board on almost everything, from tornadoes to volcanoes. We've had 2 islands that were created out of nothing. They just popped out of the water. We've had major hurricanes, the sizes, and rainstorms like over here. You have to change your rain gauge from measuring inches and measuring feet now. We've had rain within 48 hours, over 2 feet.
Also,
over 2,
the intensifying of the hurricanes also.
Sure. But you have to you have to notice that something is wrong when you have to change your rain gauges from what it's reading in inches to feet. That's not normal.
No.
We have the magnetic north moving at 12 times its normal rate, and it's within a circle that when I plotted past time periods that it's passed before, because we have a record of the magnetic north that's stored within the rock, and they can tell where the magnetic north was throughout the last millennium. And I went back and I plotted the years that it occurred as far as this planet passing, and it gave me somewhat of a tight circle. Well, the magnetic field right now that we have is inside that circle, indicating the same position that it was where it passed before, because the magnetic field is affected by the approach of this planet. The only thing that really affects a magnetic field is another magnetic field, and this planet has one, a large one. because gravity is the weaker force. We live in an electromagnetic universe. That's just now been, we say, debated still, but we have visual proof of that nature provided within the universe when comet sighting springs passed by Mars. And it made an electrical discharge onto the planet. It lit up the entire planet like it was a light bulb. And it can't do that if a comet's tail is ice particles. It can only do it if the comet's tail is plasma. And the physicists were correct. So the astronomers, on some of their models, are completely wrong. They do not. Their theories that they claim to be facts, and they're not. That isn't good. You have to have the correct models to better predict this planet and what it will cause pertaining to the planet. One of the biggest side effects of that, having the wrong formula, is that there's only a biblical model that shows that Earth slowed down in its rotation as it passed through the plasma tail and lost 12 hours of its rotational time period, as well as X amount in its forward position. So without this biblical record, we'd have no record at all to prove that the Earth will slow down by 12 hours when it re-enters the tail of this comet/planet, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Well, not to mention with the pole shift that's going to be happening, we're also going to get peppered with the debris field, correct?
Yes, they happen at different times.
Will that be first, the debris field?
No, that's last. First is when we go through the plasma and the aurora will come down to the equator, and it'll be very, very bright, greenish, bluish colors, and it'll sound like a trumpet. Then the last 6 hours of its approach before it crosses, then the magnetic fields between the two planets will attract each other, and each planet will start to tilt. And Earth will tilt 26 to 28 degrees towards this planet. Well, that's roughly 1,800 miles within 6 hours. That gives you roughly 300-mile-an-hour winds on open water, somewhere around there, and maybe 150-mile-an-hour winds on land when you're 90 degrees from the pivot point of the tilt. And then as it comes, when it reaches us, just about even with us, then you have plasma jumping from the planet, which is basically lightning bolts, roughly 30 miles across. And these lightning bolts will make craters on the surface of the Earth. And the sound from these lightning bolts will be deafening. It'll be extremely loud. And as the Earth is tilting, you're going to have the water of the ocean sloshing, going north and south. But also when Earth comes to a stop in its rotation, there's about 12 kilometers of water around the equator. There's a bulge there, about 12 kilometers, and that water's going to dissipate towards the north and south poles within that time frame, flooding the extreme north and extreme south regions of the planet, like northern Canada, northern Russia, maybe England. Yeah, you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of feet of water. Then when the Earth's tilting, this is the water will slosh because it's moving at a pretty decent rate. Plus the winds are carrying waves, so you have that in addition. So you're looking at severe coastal flooding in the northern and southern regions of probably 200 to 500 miles from the coastline. Every continent on Earth is going to shift. Every island and mountain will have a new location. There'll be some brand new mountain ranges. There'll be some other mountain ranges that may be plains after that and maybe flattened. Now, each
so
time
what do you
think
about these underground bunkers? Will they survive down there? Because I just don't think they will.
Underground bunkers is actually the worst place to be.
That's what I was thinking, because if the Earth's crust is going to pull away from the Earth and start busting apart, you'd think these bunkers are going to bust all up.
Correct. You have to have a mobile plan in place, and you have to do your calculations correct. And you have to position yourself very close to the pivot point of the tilt, for one, because that's what's causing the major part of this disaster. And then the second major part of this disaster is you need to be on the correct half of the Earth for the major meteor shower. And both of those points gives us near the Middle East region or Jerusalem to be in. That would be the safest place, roughly, on the planet, because that's what the Bible is indicating in multiple ways. I can point that out.
Really?
Yeah. Remember where it says in the Bible, it says he will make day into night and night into day.
Uh-huh.
What that qualifies that your hours are exactly opposite by 12 hours. Remember where he also says, I will send 4 angels to stop the winds. Winds are created by Earth's rotation. For the winds to stop, you have to stop the rotation of the Earth. So that's an indicator right there that the Earth's rotation will stop. And remember where it says Yeshua comes mid of night? Well, the nighttime in March is the safe side of Earth to be on. And he says that he comes in Jerusalem, mid of night. So it's not going to come in the middle of the U.S. on the daylight side. He's coming in Jerusalem, mid of night. He didn't say midnight. Don't mix that with a modern term. Midnight did not exist. Not the way we use it today. Today we automatically associate that with 12 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
That's not what he said. He said mid of night. That night on the Jerusalem side would be 12 hours longer than a normal night of 12 hours. They'll have a total of 24 hours because the Earth is slowed down by 12. And it will come mid of that night. That meant after the first 12 hours. So if you look at your watch, it's going to say like 6 in the morning. But it'll still be as dark as midnight because he's going to come mid of a 24-hour night. Now, the day side on the United States side or North and South America, it'll be 24 hours of daylight. Remember during Joshua's long day, he had 12 extra hours of light time. So he had a 24-hour day. And guess what? We can build a scientific model that proves this out when we use the plasma universe model. And the information from the Asian astronomers gives us the entry and exit, just like a train. We have the tracks of this train laid out. This train does not jump track. It may arrive early, it may arrive late, but it's staying on that track. And that track exits out in the month of either March or April. It seems to be more likely March out of all. Interesting little future coming up here, a little event for the future. Yeah.
Now, you said that you have some new findings. Why don't you tell us about how that came about and what you found?
Okay, well, in 2016, I made an estimate, which was not a prediction, because I've stated clearly, I do not have a crystal ball. I cannot predict the future. But people look for absolutes, and you can't have absolutes.
Yeah, I get that all the time. What date? What month is it going to come? When's the date? Well, how do we know? You know, we have no idea where this thing's lingering at.
Correct. The Bible clearly gives indicators there's watchmen on the wall. Not everyone is a watchman. And it's the duty of a watchman when he sees the enemy to warn the public. Okay? And Yeshua says a watchman is going to notice the sign in the heavens for you, basically. Because he says, before I come, I'll give you a sign in the heavens. So where are we supposed to look? When he says the moon is at the foot of the woman. If it says moon, where do we look? In the skies. What part of the skies? When it says the stars are out. Nighttime. From where? The Bible says all views are done from Jerusalem. Just like we have Greenwich Village for world time, the Bible clearly gives us biblical time is set by Jerusalem time. When in 2016, when the moon was at the foot of Virgo, it gave me great concerns, as I quoted that exact same statement there. It gave me great concerns because that was the natural position of the moon. And nothing happened. I said it gave us great concerns for us to watch. Nothing happened. So we turned back to the biblical records to figure out what are we missing. And come to find out we were missing data. When we went back and read Joshua's long day, he said the moon and basically the sun he was talking about, or Earth's rotation, the moon and the Earth's rotation was delayed by 12 hours. Well, I forgot the delay the moon's position by 12 hours. So when I went to year 2017 and we delayed it by 12 hours, guess what? It puts it exactly at the foot of Virgo. And the second thing that's extraordinary is that she's pregnant with the planet Jupiter in March. So the watchman on the wall are supposed to be attentive and look. If we see this planet, it's going to look like a star, and it'll be at the beginning of a Hanukkah, and it'll be under Job's coffin on the ecliptic, coming out of Sagittarius. That narrows our field of view extremely. That would be at the beginning of Hanukkah, and according to Daniel's numbers now, if we use that, it says the peace agreement is at the end of Hanukkah, which is December 30 or 31st, I forgot which one it is, will be the peace agreement. Now, that's as far as the numbers gives us. So if this date would be correct, and not to qualify if, it gives me great concern, and I cannot predict the future. If this date is factual, then that means seal 3 and 4, economic collapse and terrorism over a quarter of the world population, will happen before the end of December. Because the seal 5 is a peace agreement for that war that happened prior on seal 4. So I think we're in for a hard time right after the elections. I think the globalists are going to use the elections as a fall guy, basically, if you want to call it, that they will blame, that the economy collapsed because they're in fear of whoever our elected president would be. So it gives them some place to put the blame, and actually it's not them. It's a globalist doing this. I think things we have a possibility of things getting very bad for us very soon globally.
Well, the Bible does say that there's another war that'll go down, and that the shipping will go down, and I think all this is supposed to happen before this planet comes around.
Oh, without a doubt. If my estimate here, whatever you want to call it, if the economy is going to collapse shortly after the election, then I would say that the dollar would have to go up before the election, okay? And then that would give us a windfall for us to prepare, because many of us are still very tight with money, and we're not fully prepared with food and weapons if some people need it. Remember what the Bible, Yeshua says, sell your cloak if you have to get a sword. Well, we don't use swords today, but he's saying sell something valuable if you have to get your weapon, because a crook will not come to steal from a person who has a weapon. They're basically cowards, and they're going to go where...
Yeah, easy prey.
Exactly. And so many of these people will not have food. Therefore, they'll have to stand in line and wait for the government to feed them. Remember, they're going to cause economic collapse, which is called a bail-in. They're going to ration money. Then they're going to ration food because the economy is going to collapse. And then they're going to ration fuel because they don't have a Middle East war happening that's going to drive oil prices to $200 to $300 a barrel. Therefore, it's going to be very rare coming out of the Gulf because of the war. And what is coming out is going to be very expensive. So now, with those three factors of rationing money, rationing food, and rationing, you got control of the people. So the only way to beat that is you have to be prepared before this happens. And the Bible clearly tells you to do this. It says on the Sabbath year and on a Jubilee year, you get out of financing. You do not lend money out. Well, guess what? If you put your money in the bank, they lend it out for you.
Yeah.
So the only way to not get your money lent out is to pull it out of the bank. The other one is that stock up food. If you don't want to stand in line, in a long line, waiting for the government to dish out bread on one day and dairy on another day and vegetables on another day, then I suggest that you get some freeze-dried and some other canned goods, just like you would for a hurricane or any type of it. Remember, overseas, the political people are warning their people, their population.
Yeah, they're telling them. I've been seeing it. It's right on their news. They're telling people to prepare, but they aren't over here.
Right. They tell them to stock up a minimum of 10 days, because telling them a 10-day stock up will not cause a panic. And then later on, they'll tell them stock up for 30 days, maybe. So they'll gradually increase it without causing a shock to the economy.
Yeah.
If you notice what Putin did, remember he did, I think 14 million people exercise for them to go on these underground shelters.
Yeah.
And he claimed that it was
It
a
was
nuclear.
40 million people.
Okay, 40 million. And he said it was for preparedness for in case of a nuclear attack. But it took him 3 days to get the people through the exercise. A nuclear attack is within 15 minutes. What he was teaching them is for a meteor strike. If they would have a meteor strike, you'd have days to prepare, to go on the ground.
Yeah.
It was his way of helping his people.
Yeah, and they also announced it on their news about the planet coming.
Yes, it did. I saw the videos on that.
Yeah, I saw the video too. They announced it, and so did China.
There is enough scientific information in white paper reports, certified, qualified, that states that we have unknown gravity affecting our planets and our comets and our asteroids. It's the same area of space where they were looking for the 10th planet with the Pioneer and Voyager probes. We have 14 models in the biblical records. We have the Chinese records. You put all this together, there's 88 constellations. All of the data is pointing to only one constellation, Sagittarius. Guess what that's called? That's called south of the universe. South of the universe is not polar south, like so many people on the internet claim. That's not south of the universe. South of the universe is like a flat table. You have the compass on a flat table, cardinal points. Well, midnight, around the 4th of July, midnight, you're looking due south on the ecliptic. The ecliptic is where the sun passes across the sky. There's a thin line that represents the planetary plane of Earth. And for us to have a meteor shower, for this thing to cross us, it has to be on the ecliptic, that thin line across the sky. Otherwise, it will not cross our path if it's off of that.
Well, I had read an article stating that they also have some type of cloaking device up where we can't see it.
Correct. I was the first one to propose that. I had that confirmed from a senior NASA engineer that's retired. And I asked him, do they have the ability to cloak a planet if it was approaching? He gave me one word qualifier. He said yes. He could not go into great details because it's still classified. But he gave me a simple yes. And if you can look up in Wikipedia cloaking, and it tells you the ability of bin light to redirect light. Remember, we see an object simply because light is bouncing off of it. The sun rays is hitting it and it's bouncing off of it. And if you redirect the light, you can't see it because it never reaches your eye. That's what cloaking is. Lasers are used to redirect the light. And we have space-based lasers. Reagan put them up there. Reagan gave the speech to the UN. Remember, he said if we as a nation, a world had an outside threat threatening Earth, that we would unite and put all our differences aside. A lot of people thought there were some people that thought he was talking about aliens. No, he wasn't talking about aliens. Talking about the outside threat was this inbound planet. So
basically, after the election is when we're going to go through the economy collapse. And
sometime after the election, I believe. And it will probably be blamed on no matter who our president is elected. It's going to be their way of directing blame. And it'll be globally, this economic crash, okay? But it's actually the globalists pulling the trigger on getting control over the people before. That's how we'll know that this planet is actually approaching. On what year? 3 to 4 months ahead of time, they have to pull the economy. They have to pull banking. In other words, they have to ration money, ration food, and ration fuel. Then you know that it's going to be this next following March or April, but March is a higher indicator.
Now, see, I also had read that they plan on pulling a false flag on us, that they plan on doing an EMP, making our electrical grid go down, so that if they do an EMP on the United States, a lot of people will die because they need electricity to live. People that are on dialysis, people that are in the hospital.
They won't. Yeah, I can assure you they won't do that. They may do it over a city, okay, if it was a ground attack, but they will not do a black flag across the whole United States. Won't do it because that would take out commercial planes. And right now they still don't know what side of the earth the meteor shower is going to hit. Therefore,
well,
they need commercial.
Do you know that
the globalists.
North Korea has a satellite that flies over the United States twice a day that has the capability of doing an EMP on us?
Well, they're not sure for sure, but they're worried about it. Is the actual. Okay, but they won't do it. Remember, the Bible says there'll be rumor or war, and part of this is rumor. The war that's clear is going to be in the Middle East to cause an oil shortage, and that there'll be a war for Mr. Damascus to be ruined, and that there'll be a union of 10 Arab nations that are going to be coming together. Well, we had part of prophecy that was fulfilled just a while back when Iraq split its governing body into three: Kurd, Shiite, and Sunni. Well, that gives you the 10, because out of one will come three, and four later, it says. Well, the fourth one is there's going to be a governing little, just like Washington, D.C. is, a little District of Columbia, you want to call it, where that's the little horn, and these Arab nations will loan their army to this little horn, if you want to call it, to make war. With whom? Europe. And any other Christian group that's anywhere in any of these countries. They're going to be cutting off heads.
Well, that is what Al Cuppett had said to me years ago, and he is the retired Joint Chief of Staff, but he said that what they're going to do is cause devastation in the United States and make the people want to walk into the FEMA camps. They're going to tell them, come here, you'll get a warm meal, a hot shower, a place to sleep, and once you get in the camps, you are going to be kneeled down in front of the guillotines and told, accept Satan as your savior or be beheaded.
Well, I don't know about that last part, but yet, according to a FEMA camp manager, I won't mention his name, but he mentioned what they were for. Anyone who, during this time, there's going to be a form of martial law with a curfew. Okay, when it's a national merger is a form of martial law. It's just a little bit more extensive than martial law. And at one point, they're going to give curfews. Well, if anybody who's lost their home and they're sleeping on the streets, they're in violation of the curfew. They will be picked up, and they'll be brought to FEMA camps. The FEMA camp is for the homeless.
They're already picking the homeless up.
Well, that proves my point, what I'm telling you. That's what the FEMA camps are for. They're for the homeless, the people who will lose their homes during this time. Remember what the Bible says: get out of the banks, basically. Do not loan money. The banks are, therefore, then you better pay your house note if you have it, or get a small amount of dinar. It doesn't take much. See if it will go up. We're hoping that it does, because many of us need a financial break. And so,
for those that hold a mortgage, and once the economy collapses and they have no way to pay their mortgage, they will immediately become homeless.
Mm-hmm. Remember when Moses was for the Exodus, well, just before the Exodus, where it was plagues and everything on Egypt?
Yes.
Remember how the Hebrews, the 3 days of darkness? Well, he told the Hebrews to stock up 3 days of oil. The Hebrews had lights at night. The Egyptians didn't. And this was this planet causing the eclipse for 3 days. That's part of the scenario.
Well, I think you're absolutely right about oil going up, because they're already advertising on the news that oil is going to really skyrocket this winter for people that are heating with fuel oil. And they're already giving out numbers. And I thought, how in the world can they do that when there's no crisis and the oil hasn't, there's no reason to raise the price for oil right now?
Well, they can estimate how severe a winter is going to be by weather reports.
Yeah, well, they were saying on the news yesterday that natural gas was going to be, to heat your home for one winter, was going to be like $700 higher, and fuel oil was going to be like $1,200 higher.
Yeah, well, keep in mind, I'm saying that oil is going to go up to $200 to $300. It's not because of a hard winter. It is because Iran and Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the Arab Emirates went to war with each other, and they blew up each other's loadout facilities for the tankers. Therefore, it leaves only one major producer out of the Persian Gulf, which would be Iraq. They won't be able to supply enough volume for everyone, so therefore there'll be a little bit of rarity for the oil, and there'll be not as many tankers willing to go into a war zone with that amount of fuel or oil on board of a ship. You could be blown out of the water.
Now, I also read that to prepare for like the beginning of nuclear winter.
No, these are all extremists. But if you understand the biblical text in the last book, his people have to be able to fly out of here, okay, to meet him in Jerusalem to fulfill a mikrah. That means a dry rehearsal, which ends up being a real event. Elijah shows up for the Feast of Passover in Jerusalem. 3.5 days later is when the Messiah shows up, which is the day of the crossing of this planet. And you see the sign in the sky then, that same night. That's described in Revelation 12:1. The globalists need commercial planes working to where the Masons and the other globalists will better fly from Europe to come to these underground facilities in America, and vice versa. These planes have to work. So there's the threat of EMP, but the EMP is not going to happen. It may happen locally to one city or two cities, but it will not happen across the nation. That would completely mess up the text of the Bible. And the Bible is quite clear if you understand it well enough.
Mm-hmm.
The wars will be skirmishes. It won't be all out, World War III. That isn't going to happen right now. That's later. It will force a peace agreement will force Israel to give up the West Bank. Israel may or may not be in this war that's coming up, but for Europe and America to have peace from terrorism, they're going to strike a deal with the mullahs, and they'll give the command for terrorism to stop when Israel gives up the West Bank, and that's how Europe gets peace. That's why all these nations will turn against Israel. Part of the reason why the extremists are fighting. And so this is just a setup. This is a setup by the globalists. This is nothing more than that. And it fulfills prophecy.
Obama's already dividing Israel.
The who?
Obama, when he went over there for that funeral 2 weeks ago, he gave a eulogy speech, and he said that Israel it belongs to Pakistan.
You sure it doesn't mean Palestinian or Pakistan?
The Palestinians, yes, the Palestinians.
All right. Yeah, well, this is the Bible says there's a war against Jacob, and that people that sit at our table claiming to be our friend are actually our enemy. Well, they're in Washington right now, and they're in Europe claiming to be our friends, and they only seek our destruction. Jacob is Jews and Christians, basically, and whoever is adopted into this house that believes in the Messiah and the Father. You're adopted into Israel. It's clear. The text is clear in saying that. So they're part of Jacob also. And this war is against Jacob. Esau is forming a war against. That started in the year 2001. That was the jihad. That started it. And that started Jacob's trouble. You want to know how long Jacob struggled? Let's read his story about his marriage. For 7 years he worked. Then when he went to marry, he was tricked with a bride he knew nothing about. Well, reverse the roles. We're waiting for a groom. We were tricked with a groom we knew nothing about, and it claimed to be the Messiah. Do I really have to mention the name? Now we have to wait another 7 years. Okay, but there's a Jubilee. You can't marry during the Jubilee. There's no food for all the guests at the wedding because you're in a conservative mode in a Jubilee and a Sabbath year. So after this Jubilee, it's when guess what? That's when the sign in the heaven appears. And he said this generation that saw Israel formed will not die out before all is fulfilled. They're in the mid-80s right now. Jupiter has an orbit of 11.8 years. Jupiter is in the belly of Virgo. And next time, I cannot find a date that Jupiter is going to be in Virgo with Virgo as the constellation at midnight in Jerusalem. That 11.8 years does not fall on a Sabbath year or a Jubilee, for sure for the next 50 years. So this entire generation will be dead. if it goes another 50 years. And there's no lineup whatsoever of Jupiter going into the belly during the Sabbath or Jubilee year, or right after one. It just doesn't happen. It's either this or nothing, basically. And we'll see.
Yeah.
The watchmen have to be attentive. He says, for I don't have to tell you, for you already know. He says, be attentive. He already gives us the date, but his date, he didn't have a calendar. They didn't have a calendar. He knew we'd have a different calendar today. And we don't even have to fight over what Hebrew calendar follows. Whenever they announce the 40-day warning, that 40-day will give us the day of the crossing. And we know 3.5 days earlier than that is Passover. So whatever that day is going to be is going to confirm the Almighty calendar. Just like he confirmed the calendar to the Hebrews at Mount Sinai again, because they lost it. Well, we've somewhat lost the calendar again now. There's about 7 or 8 different Hebrew calendars. Therefore, I won't go into a debate which Hebrew calendar is correct.
Yeah.
But they better be open to the Almighty showing them which one it is, because it's going to arrive. Elijah will arrive on the Feast of Passover. In 3.5 days, mid of week, mid of night, the Messiah is coming. And that is the day of the crossing of the planet. So when they announce a 40-day warning, you'll know which calendar to use.
Do you think that there are different calendars so that to confuse people and not let them figure it out?
The word Satan in Hebrew means adversary. Today, the followers of the Bible have many adversaries that puts stumbling blocks in front of you. Like the word midnight means 12 o'clock at night today. That's a stumbling block. That's not the midnight he was talking about. They have daylight saving times just about a week before Passover starts. He doesn't use daylight saving time. We have multiple calendars, but there's only one calendar that the Father uses. And you can confirm that using the skies. There's multiple things you have to be aware of. World time is stated by Greenwich time in England. Okay? Bible states world time is stated in Jerusalem. You have to follow these Hebrew customs, and because it's a Hebrew book written by Hebrews with a Hebrew's mindset. So you have to overcome the stumbling blocks.
Mm-hmm. So what do you recommend, Gill, for those that are listening right now? Because it's going to be chaos that's going to be coming down. And the closer the election gets, the closer we come to whatever is going to go down. I mean, a lot of people, I know you recommend to try to get to Jerusalem. A lot of people don't have the finances to do that. So what would your recommendation be for those that are listening?
Fill out a life insurance policy. I'm being facetious, but remember the people in Egypt, weren't they slaves? How much property and money did they own? None. What did they leave with? Wagons of silver and gold. The Almighty will provide for us. There will be many people who have invested into the dinar. There will be many times what they need, and they'll be helping others. Whoever wishes to follow the Old Testament and the New, both, that they did not do away with his laws. Only thing that's been fulfilled completely and did away with was the sacrifices. You don't need those anymore. That was interest paid on a debt that was owed at Mount Sinai. That's paid for. But exactly the laws that we were told in many of our churches to disobey, that you don't have to follow, is exactly the problems we're having in society today, where they get cross-genders, men that claim to be, that can go into women's bathrooms. Well, guess what? The Bible says men cannot wear women's clothes and women cannot wear men's clothes. It even describes a man as one who has X and Y chromosomes, basically. He said when he created Adam, Adam is both male and female. Well, Eve is not made yet. And if you look at it carefully, he's describing X and Y chromosomes without having the word chromosomes yet. Now, can you tell me how they had a microscope 6,000 years ago to know that? They didn't. That's advanced knowledge. All right? Now, it says in the Bible, a man should not sleep with a man. We made that acceptable. The Bible, again, these same rules I'm quoting is They said you don't have to follow it. Only follow the Ten Commandments only. What about the one that says you should not have sex with animals? Well, Canada and Germany just made it where it's not illegal to have sex with animals.
Yeah. And they've
Every
been doing
time-
that in Europe
Yeah.
for quite some time. Also, I heard that they are printing a new Bible for gay and lesbian marriage.
Sure.
I do have a guest that had asked me earlier that they wanted to ask you about the dinar, and I'm going to unmute. Welcome to the call, Arizona. Did you want to ask Gill about the dinar?
Yes, I did. I'm on Social Security disability, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And if all this goes down, my source of income is, well, not if, but when, my source of income is going to be done away with, basically.
Yes.
So
Most
what
of
I
us
want
will,
to do, yeah, most of us, right. What I want to know is how much dinar can I get on the dollar right now?
The minimum you can purchase, well, unless you go to eBay, and remember, do not purchase the one with Saddam's face on it. Those are worthless. You have to purchase the newer issue ones.
The newer issue ones? Okay.
Yeah, that's the one that's the present government is in place, not Saddam's government with his face on it. So in eBay you can purchase smaller amounts, but if you go to a government managed site, agency that sells currency, the minimum is about $250 to get.
To manage that.
Well, it's roughly about 980 dinar per dollar. And
okay.
In the Iraqi budget, it states that usually in a budget they state lower numbers. But the 2017 budget says roughly around $1.17 is the revalued number they're using in their budget. So we're expecting something a little bit higher than that.
Okay.
It could be $1.25, could be $1.30, somewhere in there, $1.40, something.
Okay.
But so when
would I get that actual currency through the mail, or how would that work out?
Yes, you do a COD. You don't, that way you either use a money order or a cashier's check, and then you place your order, and then you send them a picture of the money order or the cashier's check with the order number, that you place your order with. They give you a number, and you write that on the bottom of the deal. And whenever they see that picture, then they mail it to you, and then the FedEx guy or whatever will ask
the money order and returns it to the.
Exactly. And then he hands you physical currency in your hand. Anybody that tells you they're not handing you physical currency, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Oh, yeah. It's like getting gold for a certificate.
Yeah, there's some people that are doing that still today. Well, they're not very wise. They're not going to collect very much of that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's like 500% paper written, and there's not enough gold over it, to cover that.
And that's the gold deal that Alex Jones tells everybody to get into.
I would honestly, if gold goes up, it'll be only for a short time at the beginning, and that's if it goes up. But you can check the history of metals. We're going to go through a deflationary period, not an inflation, deflation. Metals have always fallen during a deflation period.
Mm.
Land will fall, homes price will fall, but debt won't fall. Your income will fall, jobs, what you pay per hour will fall, and people will be upside down on their mortgages and everything. That's why the Bible tells you get out. He says to get as much as you can paid off and get out of the financial situation during a Shemitah and a Jubilee year. These are rehearsal patterns of a real event, and it's fixing to happen. These are not.
I'm curious. What will happen to the seniors that have a reverse mortgage?
Many people will lose their homes.
Yeah.
Because they can't pay. They just can't pay. remember, your fuel bill, electric bill will be 3, 4, 5 times higher.
Fortunately, my parents own their home, and that my father was wise enough never to get a reverse mortgage.
There you go.
So our house is protected, but we're all on Social Security, so
that's fine. Get you a little bit of dinar. Get you a little bit of dinar. You don't have to go crazy over it. 250. I would think would be easily. If it goes up to $1 something, that should be almost $250,000. Do you think you can live off of that until March? Until January? Because after January,
$250,000, I think so.
Okay, so after January, you hit your plane, buy a ticket, and you join us in Jerusalem. Because remember, these are not vain religious acts in the Bible. These are rehearsal patterns to get you in tune with a real event. Elijah's coming back, announcing the Messiah is coming, and he will announce him at Passover. But Passover is only held in Jerusalem.
I've got a question though, Gil. It says in the Bible that if, and I've asked you this before, and I know you answered me already, but I can't remember exactly what you said. It says in the Bible that if they say that the Christ is here, do not go. If it says
Correct.
They say the Christ is there, because there's Project Bluebeam too. Project Bluebeam is going to be put into place so people see these images of Jesus in the sky, and
look, that's internet stuff. I don't believe that's going to happen for multiple reasons. Okay. Remember where the Bible gives you an indication where he's going to be coming out at. The false Jesus. He says, when you hear them say, I'm coming out of the desert, don't go. That's a false one. Well, in Muslim tradition, Yeshua or Jesus is going to walk out the desert as a prophet, not as a Messiah.
I see.
Jesus is listed in Islam as a prophet, as well as in Judaism as a prophet. So he's going to walk out, this false one is going to walk out of the desert as a prophet. He's going to point to the Mahdi and say, he is your Messiah. So the false prophet is the one who comes out of the desert, which is going to be a look-alike, if you want to call him that, or it's an imposter of Jesus or Yeshua.
Okay.
Okay.
Real quick. I know you don't. I've been asking quite a few questions, but there are quite a few very devout Christian people, very good Christian people, who are not going to be in Jerusalem. What happens to them?
Let me give you a little help. Today, we take wicked as being equivalent to evil. But that's not what the word meant in the Bible when it was written. Just like today, if we buy a nice car, somebody would come up and say, boy, that's bad. Well, 20 years ago, the word bad meant not good. Today it means a totally different thing.
Yeah, I know.
But the word evil in the biblical sense is not the same meaning we have today. It means one who has blended. The root word comes from the candle wick maker, where you take two threads and intertwine them to make a wick. But one who's doing wicked takes one thread of truth, one thread of falseness, and intertwines it. That's called wickedness. That's not the same as evil. Evil is one who is void of the Almighty's laws completely. Wicked is one who is blending man's laws with his laws. Can't do that.
Right.
That's also called, in another way, a fence rider. Lukewarm. He says lukewarm people don't make it.
So
now,
these people are all going to hell then?
No. That's not what the Bible, the Scripture tells us.
Oh, okay. But they're just not going to go, and they're not going to go with Jesus.
That they don't get to the place. There's two taking aways in the Bible. People miss that because they don't understand it clearly. They're defined completely different. The first taking away is to the wilderness, it says. That's the one Yeshua is bringing a remnant, he said. So that's not the entire body of believers. Because some of the entire body are somewhat wicked. They've adopted man-made things, okay? And whether it's the calendar, whether it's science they adopted instead of the proper science, or anything. You have to overcome the obstacles, the evil ones, and what they put in front of you. If you don't This is a final exam, if you want to call it, open book test. And there's a remnant that makes it to the place of safety. Now, they're in that place of safety throughout the Great Tribulation. And anyone who is not in that place of safety has to go through the Great Tribulation. Then at the end of that, the two prophets die, remember? And they're dead for 3.5 days. And then it says the dead are first, then all the living. You can be anywhere on earth. That's all believers are resurrected then. But the dead are first, then the living.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all these people who believe that they're going to go on the rapture before the tribulation are sadly mistaken then, correct?
Because they were taught wrong within the churches. Because if you can look it up in the biblical text, if your Bible is correctly translated. If you don't, go look it up. But you're going to find out it defines what sin is. It's one who transgresses the Torah, the laws written down there. Remember where the laws he told you that these churches tell you don't have to follow? You only follow 10? Well, guess what? It says follow his mekras, his rehearsal pattern. 2, it says in there, okay, men don't dress like women, women don't dress like men. All of the social problems we have today were already defined in there not to do those.
Right.
And that's why society is breaking down. They're not following his laws.
Nope.
Okay, so if we get back to following, guess what? Then if you follow the last hour of the last day, you're in the place of safety. But if you follow them, that means you're going to be in Jerusalem for Passover coming up here. That a team of wild horses will not stop you from being there, because you're following his instructions, not my instructions, his instructions. Elijah is not going to show up in New York or Paris. You can read the Joel.
Elijah can only show up in one spot. Jesus is
exactly.
going to show up everywhere.
Exactly.
Okay.
And when it shows up, this is 3.5 days prior to the crossing of this planet. Well, that's when they turn off all generators globally. So those next 3 nights, you're in the dark, except for oil lamps. There's no electricity. So when Elijah shows up for the Feast of Passover, you're burning oil lamps and candles again. So there's no TV crews or radio stations announcing and showing you that Elijah has come. This is a private meeting for the remnant that has showed up. And it's also a private meeting 3.5 days later when Yeshua shows up, because everybody else will be underground, asking the rocks to cover them.
Wishing that the mountains would fall on them. Yeah.
Yes. See, the actual word meant cover them, not necessarily fall, but cover them. They're trying to get under. That's the worst place to be. But because they're scared of Yeshua and they're scared of this planet, and only his people are above ground, waiting for him.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you, Arizona. I have a little story I want to tell Gill, so let me mute you back real quick here. Gill, earlier today we had a little conversation on the phone, and I explained to you a little bit about being targeted. A lot of the people that are targeted right now are being targeted by these groups that belong to churches. The Catholic Church is involved. The Church of Scientology is involved in this targeting. The Jehovah's Witnesses are involved in this targeting.
Let me help you.
There is a woman that is a target in Ohio that the woman next door to her is the one who is targeting her. She is microwaving her. She is poisoning her. And she goes to church every Sunday. And this woman lives so close to her. It's her house, a driveway, and a house. When their windows are open, she can hear what they say in their house. Her little 16-year-old daughter came home from school and told her mother how proud she was of her, that she's doing such a great job microwaving the woman next door. But she feels she's saved from all of this because she believes in Jesus. And she even said to the woman that I talked to in Ohio, well, what would Bad Baby say if I told her I have Jesus? What right does she have to tell me I don't have Jesus? My answer to that was, I'm not saying you don't have Jesus, but does he condone you murdering your next-door neighbor? And the fact that these people are going to these churches that are misleading them, they think that they're all going to be saved. What is your comment on that?
Remember in the biblical text it says the synagogue of Satan? Remember in most King James Bible it says that? Well,
yes.
I prayed one day because I recognize those two words as Hebrew words. Synagogue means assembly. Satan means adversary. If you really want to know, if you want to call him the devil's name, you go read it in, I think, the Book of Jubilee or one of those outside books. It gives you the actual names. I don't have them memorized because I don't want to know his name. But it's not Satan. Satan is not a name. It simply means adversary because it's a Hebrew word. Satan in Hebrew means adversary. So I prayed I thought I knew the answer. I thought this was talking about Muslims because they were attacking Jacob. So I asked for clarity that night. I prayed and I said, so I prayed in Hebrew and I prayed in English. I said, who are the ones who assemble who are against you and your people? Because that's what it basically says right there. But the following morning I heard his voice. I've only heard his voice 3 times in my entire life. Well, that time I heard his voice the following morning. And he gave me this one-liner. He says, all the ones dressed in black like a uniform. Now, I'm going to say it one more time. All the ones dressed in black like a uniform. It took me about a week to figure out how complex and all-encompassing that one sentence was. He named every major religion. He named the Orthodox. He named the Catholics. He named the Eastern Orthodox. He named the Coptic Christians. He named the Armenians. He named, you go on and on with this, okay? But keep in mind, the entire Bible is both legal, which is what the Old Testament is, legal and moral. Well, he just also named the legal system. He named the judges in the black robes. He named the lawyers in the black suit. He named the SWAT team that's arresting you. And this was 2 or 3 months before ISIS showed up, dressed in black in the middle of the desert. Our adversaries choose black to wear constantly like a uniform. Just because someone's wearing a black T-shirt, don't say that they're Satanists or not. The adversary. That's not what he said. He says the ones that dress like a uniform. They're constantly dressing in black. They're in an organization. Whether it's secret or open, they're in an organization. Those are our adversaries. You didn't have to name them like you named them earlier. All the ones you named earlier dressed in black.
Yes.
These are our adversaries. These are the ones who assemble and are not teaching the literal word of what the Scripture says. And the only way you're going to find out the literal word is study some Hebrew and go back to the Hebrew writings to see if your Bible matches it. I went through 5 of them, and I only had to settle with one that's close, because there's not a single Bible we have printed in English that matched the Hebrew. Not a single one. But the closest one I could find that matches is called the ISR, the Institute of Scripture Research, out of South Africa. It still misses the Aleph and the Tav, which are listed in the Hebrew. So I turned back to the Hebrew to make some to mark up my Bible. I'll mark where the Aleph and Tav is, because Yeshua said that's him. You heard it as Alpha and Omega, but the New Testament wasn't written yet when he said that. He says, "I am this mystery." It was the Old Testament, and it was written in Hebrew. What is the Aleph and the Tav? And he is this mystery. And there's a whole part of the Bible we completely haven't studied yet, the meaning of, and that's the deepness of the Aleph and Tav, on where it is and what its meanings are for that passage. And there's something like 5,000 places or so. The next 1,000 years we'll still be studying the Scripture, but we have yet to scratch the surface of it, the depth of it.
So actually, all these people that are going to church, I call them $5 Christians, that are, I do not, it boggles my mind that they can actually think that they're going to go to heaven and that they're following Jesus and that they're good people when they're poisoning, harassing, murdering, torturing innocent people, and then they walk down the street singing, "Hallelujah, Jesus, I'm so glad I'm saved." I mean, how blind can you be?
Well, there's a big reasons why many of these so-called churches, and assemblies do not teach Hebrew or have Hebrew classes for the people to understand to where they could go back and read the original. Because it would kill most doctrine. It would absolutely break it because they would see for themselves it doesn't say this. These things that many of these religious institutions are saying. I forgot what the number is on how many religious institutions and Christians there are in Christianity, but it's in the thousands.
Well, just take ISIS for an example. Right now, they're doing some kind of ritual where they're taking innocent men and cutting their heart out and eating it. It's some ritual of purifying themselves. How in the world?
Who is it that's doing this?
ISIS.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
They're taking innocent men, holding them down, and they're doing it in a group setting, cutting these men's heart out and eating it. And it's some type of, they believe that it's a purification for them, for them to, I don't know, see Mahdi or whoever they're going to see, I don't know. But I mean, how in the world can you think that's something good?
No comment on that one. Evil will do evil. And there's many, we have not yet seen the extent of evil yet. It's going to go beyond that. It's going to go beyond that.
Well, I agree with you. I think it is going to go beyond that. Because they are planning more evil every day. Yep.
Put it this way, I would not want to be on the wrong side of the fence for the Great Tribulation. I'm going to do my best. And remember, Yeshua is the one that's doing the choosing. So I'm hoping to make it into the place of safety throughout the 3.5 years of the Great Tribulation. Because no one's going to be leaving Earth for the Great Tribulation. Only thing is a remnant is going to be placed in the wilderness where they're protected by Him and fed by Him. And the enemy can't touch them. That is the bride and the bridemaid. This is going to be literal events. People don't realize how literal this Bible is going to be. These customs that He set down are not vain religious acts. The laws He laid down are not vain religious acts. There are laws to help you build holy, righteous character. How can you have a utopia at the end of this without people being on the same page of being holy, righteous people? And the only way you can do that is follow the covenant, the entire covenant He gave us in the Torah. Yeshua followed it. The 12 apostles followed it. What the laws that Yeshua was breaking was the man-made add-on, the rabbinical add-ons. He says no man has a right to add or take away from the law. Those are His exact words. And when you go look up what sin is, it's one who transgressed God's laws. We have churches today that teach how to transgress His laws.
What about the children, Gill? Because the children are being programmed, if you ask me. They're actually asking the children at the age of 4 years old before they go into school to mark what gender they feel they are. They're putting the thought in that child's head. They're innocent. So where do they lie in all this?
Did not children die when Yeshua was on earth?
Yeah.
Did He not resurrect a few children? It's listed in Luke. It's listed on a few of them. What about Lazarus? Was Lazarus a good man? Didn't he die? But wasn't he resurrected? Death is not a permanent state unless you're evil. Wicked is one who blends. But at least you believe in the Father and the Son, you will be resurrected again. But the ones who are void of that faith, that there's no Father and no Son, they will stay. They will stay in the ground for the next 1,000 years. At the end of the 1,000 years, that's when they're resurrected. Only the evil ones are resurrected, and they're given their final judgment. And the old earth and them are cast out in outer darkness. Then the Father makes a whole new earth as it was in Adam and Eve's time. You had more crust, more land than we do now today. You had a canopy of water around it where you had a perfect climate, and the earth's tilt was not tilted as much. So all of those factors give you a perfect living condition. And we're put back on earth, and the New Jerusalem sets down on earth, and we live with Elohim. The word Elohim means the authority figures. The Father is an authority figure, so is Yeshua is an authority figure. But when you look up the definition of God, is one who has never been created, cannot die, and always existed. Well, there's only one of those. That's the Father. That's why Yeshua's own word says, when he asks, are you the Father? No. He says, his own words, he says, I have no power unless the Father gives me some. He says, I cannot tell time or the future unless the Father tells me when. Yeshua was the first of creation. That's when time and space was created. At the same time when Yeshua, time and space came into existence when Yeshua was created as a spirit being.
Well, the thing that disturbs me about targeted individuals is the fact that they are all financially devastated. So there is no way that these people will ever make it to Jerusalem.
Wrong. That's the same problem you would have qualified the people on the exodus out of Egypt. They were in worse shape than what you are today. They were slaves in a more true sense. When the dinar, there will be many people with dinar and profits, and they will be generous with their money, helping people, whoever wishes to follow his full commandments and his full rehearsal pattern.
I get you now. Okay. All right, I get it now.
Remember where it says, do not cast pearls before swine.
Yeah.
Well, the Bible tells you do not eat swine. It also tells you not to eat catfish and many other animals because they clean the earth. Well, he says don't cast pearls before swine. Do not give money to the people who do not follow his full regimen of what he says not to do and do.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones who wish to do it, even if they were taught wrong on the last day of the last hour, if they repent and want to follow all of it, they're in. Remember the parable of workers that worked in the field? He says, I'll give you X amount of money to work in my field for, many workers went in the morning, then he hired some more at noon. He gave, and then he had some that only worked for an hour. But he gave them all the same pay. It's the same thing with this. If you were to follow his laws all of your life versus one who followed only for the last hour, to get the same reward, to get in a place of safety.
Well, that's very encouraging. Because I know a lot of targeted individuals feel hopeless and helpless.
He doesn't hold it against you that you've been taught wrong. He only holds it against you if you still continue to deny not changing.
Yes.
But that's called stubbornness. That's called the prodigal son. He won't change. He won't come back. He eats with the swine. That's what the prodigal son had to do before he decided. And when he did come back, the father welcomed him with open arms and still gave him another share of everything he had, like he never left. Religion has created more prodigal sons than any other thing on earth. Because this is not about religion. This is about a way of life, accepting it as building a holy, righteous character from the time you get up to the time you go to bed. These are instructions on how to govern and rule and build holy, righteous character. That's your process in life. Build holy, righteous character in yourself. When you take care of yourself, the rest of the world take care of itself also. That's how you build a unified people at the end of the 1,000 years, to where they can live together. Torah is inscribed in their hearts and their minds. That means you have it memorized and you believe it with your heart and you follow it. That's the way they would write it in the ancient texts.
Well, that's why it says ye of so little faith, too.
Yep.
Okay, Gil, well, we're coming up on the last 15 minutes. Is there anything that you want to cover for the last few minutes of the show?
Time is running out, people. I believe after this election, I don't know how much longer after the election, before we start to see dominoes fall. But it greatly concerns me because there's no absolute. I cannot tell the future. I can just read the Bible and understand it, and I'm anticipating and seeing signs that greatly concerns me on what's happening globally. Prepare, because I believe he's coming back extremely soon. And it's measured in months and weeks, not in years.
So and when the havoc does start, it's not going to be a pretty picture.
No, you stay home, and you're not going to be bothered. If you have your food, you have your lights, or a little generator, whatever, a little bit of fuel for the generator, and you have a weapon, they're going to leave you alone. But they're going to be robbing the people who leave their home unattended to go stand in line for food. They're going to go rob those. They're not going to be robbing you because you're outside with a gun or sitting around. They see your lights. They're going to leave you alone because they're going to pick the easy targets.
Boy, it's going to be a real mess. You know that, Gill?
It's supposed to be, but it won't be the extreme mess like it will be during the Great Tribulation. This is called, remember, we're in tribulations right now, but we're not in the Great Tribulations. And right now we're fixing to get kind of like a mid-trib, a little bit higher trouble times. Because that's what tribulation means, troubling times. That it's fixing to elevate a little bit, and then there'll be a peace agreement. And it'll look like things are going back to normal. Remember, when peace is announced, sudden destruction is near. Well, when the peace is announced at the end of December, by the end of January is a 40-day warning of this inbound planet. That's when you hear about destruction is near. And we'll have a date after that. There's no way that they could have wrote the book of Revelation and all these books to where it's interconnected data with that matches the end book, which is the days we're living in now, and get this correct 2,000 years ago. And have the science right, which we didn't know until the last 20 years or so. We didn't get the science right that the universe is a plasma or electromagnetic run universe. Only through a plasma model does the models reproduce the events in the Bible, 14 places. They couldn't have faked an eyewitness account correctly without knowing the science, and they didn't know it. So this book is extremely unique in every aspect of science, you see, morality, guidance. It is correct in all aspects. And I'm going to follow the detailed instructions he's given us for the end days. I'm going to be in Jerusalem shortly after that peace agreement. In January, I'm leaving. If we hear of a peace agreement at the end of December, in January, I'm leaving. I'm out of here. Because by the end of January, they're going to announce a 40-day warning. And that's when the world will actually know that star they see. Remember, when it's about 7 days away from Earth, it's only going to be about half the size of the moon, visually. Throughout most of the time, it's going to still look like a star. Like you look at Venus. Anytime you see like the first star you see at night before the rest of the stars come out, that's a planet. That's usually Venus or it's Jupiter. Well, that's the way the thing is going to be looking at in the approaching days, in the last 3 months or so. It will not be threatening yet. Not even at the 40-day mark, it won't be threatening. Not until it gets to the last 2 to 2.5 weeks will it start to get sizable in the sky. And when it's 7 days away, it's only about half as large as our moon visually.
Which Ed James talks about the kill shot. When he talks about the remote viewing, he says that there's a war going on and that one day they see the soldiers look up and they see this planet and they all lay their weapons down and go home.
Well, that goes contrary to what the Bible says. It says that there's going to be a peace agreement before any of this. So you won't be able to see this in the sky like he's saying. I'm sorry, I cannot match what he's saying with the Bible. There's too many things that are wrong with it. So as far as that goes, I wouldn't follow that. So far, the Bible science is absolutely right on. And it's no way that they could have wrote this, or normal man could have wrote this without help from the Almighty. And there's only one entity that can give you absolute truth and absolute predictions, and that's the Almighty. And he already wrote it down for us. We just need to try to understand it. And be aware. He says, look for a sign in the heaven. He literally says that. That's what we are. If we're attentive to his word, we're going to be looking for a sign. I'm just pointing out what the sign we're supposed to look for. And we have to be patient.
Well, I want to thank you, Gill, for coming on tonight and explaining it to us. It makes a lot of sense. It really does. I mean, it's a lot more clearer. And, the main thing is don't be afraid.
No, you don't have to fear. Fear is a spirit that he does not give us. That's our own emotions taking over us. But we don't have to fear. You be prepared, you have a weapon, and you guard your property and home.
So?
But you don't have to shoot somebody. You can point it at them. They'll be scared enough to leave. You try not to kill. They
try to help one another.
Exactly.
Those that you know that are true to the word, be a brother or a sister to them.
Listen to exactly what it says, and that's our instructions. And it makes the models are right on the money in Revelation as well as all of the other 14 events. It's too exact. It has 110% of my confidence that it's right, and I plan on following it. I feel sorry for the people that don't.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming out tonight and sharing with us. It's always a pleasure to have you on. You're
thank you for having me.
You're just a vast of information, Gill.
Well, thank you for having me. It's only going to be a small group. That's the scariest word in the Bible. It says remnant. A remnant is chosen to go to the wilderness. So I wish it was more, but it's already been declared.
Uh-huh.
So the rest of the people, the way that they're going to make it to heaven is most of them are going to die. Not all. He says there'll be another remnant that makes it through the Great Tribulation. And, but the only ones that didn't go through the negative part of the Great Tribulation will be the one that he places in a place of hiding in the wilderness.
Yeah, and I've instructed a lot of my Christian friends, too, that they said that their families don't know anything about tribulation. And I had instructed them to write a letter to their families and put it in their Bible and explain to them what tribulation is about and what they'll have to do in order to cut it.
Right. Basically, get you enough food until January. After that, you catch your plane. When you get to Israel, you got to stock up again on food a little bit, only to carry you to March. Israel is the breadbasket of Europe to a certain extent. When the European, when the euro collapses, there'll be hardly any way of them buying the food from Israel because their currency is not, it's losing value. So they'll have a huge amount of food for us there, for us to buy. And because of the dinar, we can buy it. So this is well planned out by the Almighty. He didn't leave out anything.
He never does, Gill.
That is correct. Never does.
Just like I never thought I'd meet you, or you never thought you'd meet me, and for some reason everybody's path crosses for a reason.
Correct. There is no such word in the Hebrew as accident. Everything has a purpose.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to thank you again for coming out and sharing with us tonight. I will get with you later on in the week and send you a copy of the show. And we appreciate your information, your wisdom, and your knowledge. And as usual, we love you. And on that note, I am going to close out.
Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fight for Our Freedom Radio. And I'm your host, Bad Baby. And tonight, we are so honored to have back with us my good friend, renowned astronomer, Gill Broussard. And we are going to update you with good information on how to prepare. Welcome to the show, Gill. How are you this evening?
Doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you back. We love hearing from you.
Well, I'm glad to take the opportunity to answer any of your followers' questions and maybe enlighten them on any new information we may have.
Well, we are going to, this evening, towards the end of the show, for those that are going to call in that are on the phone, if they want to push star 8 and raise their hand, we will allow you to be unmuted and ask Gill questions tonight. But before we get to that part of it, I want to ask you, Gill, explain to us why our government is not telling us about this planet and what's going on?
Well, it's not beneficial for people to lose their jobs. We call it a panic in the marketplace. They'd lose their retirement. Banks would seize up. Economy would come to a screeching halt, and people would be worse off than if they allowed the economy to continue. But the only thing it does, it leaves the public in the dark on preparing and studying about what could occur and what are the facts and is this object real?
Do you think, Gill, that they do not want people to be prepared or survive this event?
Different leaders have different opinions on that subject, but they've showed them models. They've had a computer model that shows them, particularly for their country, how quickly it would go into chaos if it would be announced. The market collapse, their currency falling or fluctuating drastically, and then the people would be less prepared than what they would be before. So it's really left up to an individual to do his own studies and come to some sensible conclusion. Is this a real object or is it not? And what would be a proper way of preparing for it? And so it's left up to the individual.
So why do they suppress us that are trying to get this information out so badly? Because I know a lot of people that have researched this planet and that are under great attack for even coming out here and talking about it.
I think there's various reasons for different people. Some people, I'm not quite sure whether they have correct data. And there's many people on the internet that the data, they claim to have data, but they don't. They have stories, ancient stories that could, which for the most case is not interpreted correctly. Because if you don't have a basis, a root to understand the story, like through the Chinese records, Asian records we have, now we can go back and look at these ancient writings in a much different light and understand much clearer what they're talking about.
Well, Gill, how did you decide to start researching this?
It started off with a question. People ask me different things, and I've had a question or two pertaining to this planet, whether or not it's real and it has any validity. And I gave a off-the-cuff answer saying that as far as I would be concerned, it's not real because of some of the information that I heard on the internet. It didn't make astronomical sense, didn't make mathematical sense, and often it didn't even join correctly with science. So it leads the person to believe that something like this does not exist. And that's where I was. I was a hardened skeptic. And so, but there was a series of catastrophes that happened in the past. That's quite clear to find in the text of different cultures and different periods of time. Now, was there a common denominator that was the cause of this? It definitely wasn't global warming, as what we call it today. And so I decided to check the Asian records because their records go back the furthest as far as astronomy goes. And it goes back probably close to 4,000 years, 4,000 to 5,000 years. And I picked up a white paper report. It was the reevaluation of the Eastern and Western records of the supernova of 1054. The supernova was seen earlier than what was, about 3 or 4 months earlier than what was normally dated. And that the main data that people were using, it ended up not being a supernova because this object moved through multiple constellations. A supernova is stationary, just like the North Star or any other object that's stationary. It just doesn't move through multiple constellations. And it kind of piqued my interest because that's what we're looking for. Would be an object of sizable, an object that's sizable, that has a long period of approach, that probably has not been defined properly yet. And this paper piqued my interest, so they gave very exacting information for the time, for for the time period. Elevations, time of day, where they were seeing it at, and it was not just the Chinese, but the Korean and the Japanese. So you have 3 different cultures, similar with their research. They're very exact with their plotting and information. And that's when I decided that I had enough information to make an attempt to plot this. And doing some hand calculations told me that this object was on the ecliptic. And when something is on the ecliptic, that's the only way that Earth can have a meteor shower, basically. And that was another qualifier for this object, that it had to create meteor showers. But when I got through with my calculations, and running models in the astronomy software, it proved that it crossed Earth's path twice. That is a rarity. And the other rarity was that it crossed it at roughly 150 to 152 days apart. Well, that brought up memories on what the biblical records were stating. In Noah's flood, it mentions 150 days, and in the book of Revelation, it mentions 5 months. Well, they're both the same amount of time period. And so I had to figure out how often did it come through history, what was its frequency, and what sort of catastrophes associated with it. And I found 14 cases in the biblical records and quite a few secular records. Matter of fact, today I found another one that I'm still doing some research on in the secular that lines up also with a biblical event. And again, it's shown as a winged disc. The most common drawing throughout different cultures was a disc with wings. It showed that they had a disc that would fly across the sky, basically movement,
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the perspective from someone from Earth. Now, it doesn't always pass close to Earth to where it's viewed as as a major disc. The last time it came very close to Earth was Hezekiah. And that's when our calendar year changed from 360 to 365 days. And it came semi-close after that during Yeshua's sacrifice, where it caused 3 days of darkness. 3 hours of darkness. But we haven't had a close call as in those days. But the book of Revelation gives us some very serious data and comments or statements. And it says the next time it passes that this will be the worst time in all of Earth's history. Well, the data proves out that Noah's flood actually literally happened. And that was not the worst. This next event is going to be the worst. So it definitely grabs my attention and gives me cause for concern.
Yeah, absolutely. So when this event does unfold, just exactly what will we be experiencing here on this planet?
Well, I just put out a small sheet of about 16 points. It actually should be almost maybe double that, but I didn't want to bore the people with too many details. But as it approaches, you have severe earthquake and volcanic activity. As we've seen an escalation, but it's going to be much greater even.
Right. Now, are we seeing an escalation right now because it's approaching and the closer it gets, the more it's affecting our planet?
We have dips and highs for the volcanic and the earthquake, but we've never seen it as many as we're seeing now. Let me give you, for instance, let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here.
I know I read an article where there was a couple of volcanoes that just they came alive in the last few months that have been dormant for over 300 years.
Yeah, this is common. Also, many people are not aware that under our oceans, just within the last few years, someone decided to do a survey of how many volcanoes are under our oceans. Well, we only have roughly about, I don't know the exact number, but I'll give you a ballpark, like on land it's between 1,200 to 1,800 volcanoes, on our continents. But below the oceans, we're looking at over 3 million.
Wow.
Okay. And I personally believe that that is the source of the El Nino effects and La Nino.
That's what's heating the ocean up, isn't it?
Yes, because the most active part of this is around the just south of Japan, where there's a lot more of these subsea volcanoes are going off, and the way the water currents go, it pushes that hot water towards South America whenever they're extremely active. I believe that has something to do with it, that they have not been mentioning that to the public. Because I have friends in different parts of the world that have stated they've had an earthquake, a 3 or 4 that's mentioned locally, but it's not mentioned on our national survey. The place where they're supposed to have all of the earthquake records, at the USGS records. So they're not showing us all of the earthquakes. For instance, in 1973, we'd have roughly over 4,500 earthquakes annually. Well, just in 2014, we had over 118,000 earthquakes. And if you go back a little bit further in the 1950s and put up an average of what it was per year, we have that happening in one day now on occasion. What we used to see as far as earthquakes happening throughout the whole the whole year in the last century, we're having it happen in one day now. And this is across the board on almost everything, from tornadoes to